Good morning. How's everyone doing? I am Sarah Erickson with Renegade Game Studios, and we are here with a really interesting panel that I'm excited to be part of today. So, we're going to be talking about the state of the industry. So, of course, things are a little bit crazy right now, and I just wanted to kind of talk about what things have happened, where we expect to be going, some really cool stuff that might change or that we're looking forward to, and I have some of the best people in the industry to talk with me about that today. So I'm just going to introduce everybody and then we'll jump right in. But at the end of this, if you have any questions, we would love to answer some. It's very rare that you get this amount of talent and this amount of experience in one place together. So please think of any crazy questions you want to ask and post those in chat, and then I'll be asking those at the end. So we have with us Scott Gata, president and publisher at Renegade Game Studios. Welcome, Scott.
Hello?
He
Um,
has an incredible amount of experience in this industry, everywhere from publishing Star Wars TCG over at Decipher back in the day, all the way through Upper Deck, working on the World of Warcraft card game at Cryptozoic, and then he ended up, for some reason, starting Renegade. So he's here. We're excited about that. Yay! We also have Mike Webb, the VP of Marketing, Data, and Customer Service at Alliance Game Distributors, who gets all of the amazing games from publishers like ourselves to retail stores so that they can end up on your table, which is a very important part of this industry that a lot of people may not even know a lot about. So thank you for being here, Mike.
Great to be here.
And Charlie Chu, Executive VP of Entertainment at Oni Press. So you guys make all sorts of really cool stuff, mostly comic books, and then you work with us to make some fantastic games based on those comics. And you recently started Oni Games as a little division within Oni Press, and that's why we also have Steve Ellis here, who helped start that division with you, but also has the incredible experience of owning a retail store, which, again, an important part of our industry that a lot of fans probably know a little bit more about than the publishing side. So thank you both, Charlie and Steve Ellis, for being here.
Good morning.
Morning, our pleasure.
And also, last but not least, Ivan Van Norman, who is a partner at Hunters Entertainment and head of publishing and media over there. And you guys make a lot of fantastic RPGs that we partner with you on to get all the way to the tabletop, and all sorts of really other cool stuff that you're putting out. So you're always on the edge of something amazing, and we're really excited to hear what you have as far as your thoughts about the future go. So welcome, Ivan.
Oh, happy to be
Awesome.
here.
So, jumping into a few things that I've been thinking a lot about over the last few months is just thinking back about what everything was like in February, because we as an industry had been growing for a while, and especially board games, RPGs, even comic books were really doing pretty well, and things were going pretty well for a while leading up into February. So, Scott, tell us a little bit about how you thought about the industry before everything crazy happened.
Right. We refer to February as the before times, and it was it was nice. It was nice. It was a golden age, and like seriously, like February was going really nice. I mean, I can say for Renegade, we were up. We were really on track. We were having a strong first quarter. We had a really strong plan coming into the year. We were kind of hitting the ground running. The team had worked really hard the year before. I think the industry was in a good, healthy spot. I don't necessarily mean it's not in a healthy spot now. We're just being thrown a lot of challenges and a lot of wrenches in the works, and the landscape is changing. But things were looking good in February, and then March happened.
So, Steve, you have a little bit of a similar perspective with your retail store. How are you feeling about things in February?
I mean, February was. I mean, things are great. I mean, to give you an idea how strong January and February were this year, despite March kind of falling off a cliff, my first quarter for my retail store sales were still up. And that included the tail end of March, which was less than stellar, shall we say. Yeah, so it's been it's been a roller coaster forever in the hobby market, right? We go up and down, but like the last several years have been kind of consistently strong. So it's a big change to see us facing like all of these challenges out of, what feels like out of nowhere, So it's an interesting time. I think the summer is going to really tell the tale for a lot of retailers as we try to kind of get back to business in a real way and see what happens. And I don't think anyone really knows what's going to happen as we all open up and kind of slowly re-engage with customers and try to make it all work.
Definitely. So, Charlie, everything kind of threw the entire industry for a loop, but I'm really curious in the comic book industry, what was your first instinct? Like, you see this crazy thing happening, it all sort of melded together, and we realized this was going to change things. So, as part of your business, what was your first instinctual action that you took?
I mean, it's interesting because like I very clearly remember when all of this was ramping up, kind of like right before the beginning of March, or like maybe it was the first week of March. But for us, so much of the stuff that our team is focused on and publishing at that time of the year is getting Regent season. So we were right about like we were basically all getting tooled up to go to Emerald City Comic Con in Seattle, which sort of basically kicks off the entire summer swing. It's like the time where we get to see all of our friends, the creators that we work on with books, all of you fine folks at like the gaming shows like at Gen Con. I mean, it's almost like it's the fun part of the job where we're getting excited about travel and everything. And it was just, when a lot of the stuff for COVID-19 started coming about, like we were mostly just worried about the safety of our employees, what like the implications of travel were going to be. So we were initially kind of looking at it as like, okay, we might have to start thinking about either changing the way we do exhibitions at shows. And then it ramped up into like, oh, we might not be able to do the show, or like maybe we'll have a smaller staff to like, oh God, this all moved very quickly, and it felt like this all played out in like a span of like 2 days. So what's really fascinating is that we had like there was a Wednesday or Thursday where we were all very excited and doing sort of like our booth setup, like at the warehouse and getting ready to ship it up to Seattle. And then like the next day, everyone was kind of slowing down and there was a lot of scrambling of talking to people. And it felt like the world had changed. So it was really strange. I mean, it's kind of surreal to think about it being like that was just about 90 days ago, but it feels like a lifetime ago.
I'm always
Right.
very impressed by how malleable people are and how
Yeah.
we have this ability to be able to take these challenging situations and really do the best that we can with them and jump into a whole new life without even taking a breath. And I feel like all of us have probably done that. But I know since a lot of us do work from home already, or we work in relatively small office spaces that don't have a lot of contact, it is, with the exception of conventions, it's really not that big of a deal. But Mike Webb, you handle a ton of staff who are all in a warehouse, who are trying to move packages all over the place, and logistics are just all of a sudden a nightmare. So, what was your first instinct when you realized that things had changed?
Well, when the change came, we actually ended up all four of our warehouses had to stop operations. We weren't able to have people in the building operating, and really at that point, the focus I think switched across the company into how do we appropriately prepare for the reboot when it comes? How do we make sure that employees are going to be safe? How do we make sure that we're going to be able to effectively process product, get it in people's hands? For a few weeks, we actually, took advantage of the opportunity. Without that business going on, Scott was talking about the last couple of years. It's been very busy and things have been ramping up. We had a lot of work we were able to catch up on data updating. We did some customer service training, took advantage of that opportunity for the office people that were still able to work. But certainly threw a wrench in the works with the changes in the warehouse. From there, we were able to come up with what we think is a very effective plan to keep everybody safe, to be able to ramp up to shipping more and more over time and doing it safely. Because this isn't something that's just going to be one and done. This is something we're probably going to be dealing with for quite a while until we come up with vaccines, et cetera. So took advantage of the opportunity. There was shock, certainly, as that hit. I think, though, if anything, we'll come out of this in an even better position as an industry because we already had probably more people playing our kinds of games and reading our types of comics and being engaged in pop culture than ever before in the industry in the 23 years I've been in it. And now we had the opportunity. People are staying at home. They're engaging with the products. They're engaging with stories. They're telling stories together in the role-playing field, whether it be through Roll20 or some more of the online options. So it's exciting and scary at the same time, and just trying to make sure that we can do it all appropriately going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you touched on some really important things there, especially with role playing and how that's something that we can do on Roll20. We can still get together and play with each other. So, Ivan, that's kind of your wheelhouse. What has Hunters Entertainment done? Because I feel like you guys were already so close to there. You're already selling your books through Drive Through RPG. You're already working on getting Roll20 set up and going. And you guys have really jumped into this. So tell us a little bit
Yeah,
about what you guys
we kind of we were fortunate in the sense that we were already kind of seeing the pathway towards just trying to get customers closer to our games through a digital platform, because we just knew that that's where the direction of things were going. So things just kind of accelerated quicker than we were intending on doing. So with drive-through already as an option, and we had conversations just even as late as like winter last year with Roll20 about, hey, how do we want to start creating a stronger partnership together and get a lot more involved. And the difference is between we were having those conversations with Roll20 late last year and like, okay, well, we're looking forward to like getting going with it. And then building up to this virtual convention, we uploaded 6 different digital character sheets to Roll20 over the span of 8 days to make sure that everyone had digital character sheets to be able to run the games, to be able to enjoy it and have a good time. Beyond that, like, I feel very fortunate because I feel like we've been the least affected because we're such a remote company and our focus is so much on providing content to players, not just in a physical way, but in a digital way. And we are also looking at Alice is Missing as a release that we were going to be doing this year anyway. And now that we learned that, we're in a position where remote play is a problem that we can help solve, Alice is Missing but kind of became our forefront product to be like, okay, you want to play a game where you can just text message and that's, your form of engagement. Here you go. And it's, it's like we didn't even plan it.
Hitting the zeitgeist.
Right. And we were in development for that game for like a year before even any of this happened. So it wasn't like we were responding to it. It was just something that was already part of what we were doing. So I will say that we got a little lucky that came out around this time. It was ready to go. Serendipity.
Right. Well,
but yeah.
And that was like us with puzzles. Like, ironically, we were working on a plan to do puzzles and add that to Renegade's catalog. It just felt like a natural extension of what we already do. It's an activity, it's social and everything else. And we've been working on ramping up puzzles for about a year, building the business models and doing the research and setting up manufacturing and all that. And then this hit, and I didn't want to overwhelm the team. So I was like, well, you know what? Like, we'll launch puzzles next year. And that was February. And then March hit, and I was like, we're going to launch puzzles now. And we just took all that work that we had in place, and we just sent our first 4 puzzles off to the factory this week, and we're launching puzzles, and we have more in the works. And so, we accelerated those plans, but it was just dumb luck that we kind of had that ready to go, and we're able to pull the trigger so quickly. But, sometimes things happen.
So, Scott, is there anything else that you feel like Renegade was in a really particular position to take advantage of when all of this hit?
Yeah, I mean, so I do think that, so we are predominantly a remote company, right? We have a small staff in San Diego that mostly revolves around the studio for streaming and content creation and play testing. But outside of that, we have people everywhere. So that was a very easy transition for us. But the other thing that did us that really helped us move things along is we had already been leaning into online content creation and interacting with community and building community online for the last year, and that's been a big initiative within the company to ramp that up and build that. So that was nice. Like we didn't have to scramble and start something from scratch. We could just double down on things we had already begun.
Yeah, I felt like anyone who basically had a Discord server already in place before this happened kind of already had a head start, without trying to like get caught in the noise of, oh yeah, hey, we suddenly have a Discord server, and it's been pretty awesome just kind of seeing the way to re-engage it. We had a forum like 10 years ago. We had like a posting old school forum that we were using in order to engage with community, and Discord is so much better, superior of a software when it comes to that.
So a lot of you do have these technologies that you've been using that have really helped out in this. But as a store, Steve, really you're all about that face-to-face interaction and communication. But I've been really impressed with how even as a physical location, you've been able to make the best of this. So what were a few things that you did in your store that made you, I would say, very successful even while you were shut down?
I mean, I think most of that credit goes to my staff was really proactive and got all over social media and Facebook and stuff right away. I mean, that was it was kind of that situation where it's like, oh, we're closed, right? We have to figure out how to make some money. Otherwise, I mean, I can't pay everybody forever, right? So I think having a staff that was, motivated and accepted that scenario was really important, right? Because they realized that, I can pay them for a while, but at some point we have to have revenue, right? So they really, I mean, Facebook was surprisingly effective for us. We pushed Facebook messaging really, really hard to our local consumers, and we established a really good system for curbside pickup. And then we went from no online ordering capabilities to, popping up a Square website so customers could place orders and just come pick them up. Um, and they did all of that stuff, right? So it's just, I think it's a testament once again to um, the argument I've had for years about maybe not paying retail workers minimum wage and treating them poorly. It's like I have a staff that we we pay a little better than normal. We treat them a little better than normal. We have 401k plan, we give them vacation and sick time and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, it's a business. So I think, but at the same time, it's an extension of my family, right? I mean, these people, I've got employees that have been with me for 20 years, so I think there's a lot of respect that goes both ways there between myself and the staff, so the fact that they rallied around this issue and kind of came through in ways that didn't really surprise me, but certainly impressed me, was fantastic. I mean, I talked to a lot of stores in April, and it felt like the good stores were scrapping their way to maybe 20 to 30% of sales. Some stores were closed completely and unable to do anything, but like some stores were scrapping their way to 20 and 30% of their normal sales. And my team scrapped their way to like 50% of our normal sales in April. And I mean, and it's basically just about, being scrappy and working hard in different ways and doing different things, right? So it's not easy. But yeah, it's all about that staff really rallying and bringing the community and so much support from our local customers and fans. And having an entire year's worth of jigsaw puzzle inventory on hand was fantastic as well.
It does
We
seem
sold
like
it.
puzzles have been pretty big as far as retail stores go. I'm sure you've sold a crazy amount of them because I've talked to you about it, and it's pretty unbelievable. In fact, right now, my laptop is actually as high as it is because it's stacked on puzzles. Our industry is physically being held up by puzzles right now.
It's Yeah, it was interesting to see. I mean, puzzles did really well. Family board games did really well. There was a strong flight to quality from the customer base, right? So to known strong titles did really well. Lots of no new releases really to speak of for the last couple months the last couple weeks, right? The last week or two, we've started to see new releases again. So that's, I think, going to be a big help for retail stores that are trying to come back because our customers want new cool stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, Mike, that's really pertinent to you. So, you were closed down for a couple months, and as Steve just said, not shipping out any new stuff because there wasn't any new stuff. And now, suddenly, the floodgates have opened. So, we have an incredible amount of new releases and things coming out. So, how do you manage that? How do you balance that within the excitement of the industry, within shipping all those things out? There's a lot going on there. So, how is that going for you as a distributor?
I'm think going well. One of the big things we've been looking at even before this happened, you were talking about back in February, there was a lot of business going on, but there was a distinct glut in new releases that was driving some issues for some mid-sized publishers where the long tail didn't exist on product. There were a lot of publishers who were having some issues there. And so we had been looking for a long time at a message of curation, helping people curate a collection of games rather than just chasing the new. There are tons of games that so many publishers in this industry have that are phenomenal games right now. Like Steve said, there was this flight to quality. There was a flight to known quantities. There was a flight to games you can sit down and play with the family, not necessarily the crunchiest new game. So part of our message is curating that collection, making sure we take advantage of new customers who have come into the business or returned to the business during quarantine as they've discovered having a family game night again, or maybe even playing, some games you can play online over Zoom, or some games that you can play. There's all kinds of games that we sell that you're able to interact with over, over the net. So we've that are starting to flood in. I'll be honest, I haven't felt like it's been an overwhelming flood in the past couple of weeks. I'm hoping that to some extent, just the moderating influence of the cash flow is helping us have a more steady release maybe than we were expecting. I was concerned we would have just a sudden glut day one. Here's your 2,000 titles you missed over the last 2 months. And that hasn't really materialized yet. So I think it's a great time to have the message of, hey, let's get products in that are going to turn, that are going to have have success and proven success, and games we can continue to play with the family, as well as some of the new games filtering in.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that is a really important thing to start thinking about is how do you change your product mix as a company looking forward when people are interacting with our products in a little bit different way. We have really fun games that are coming out, but maybe you can't play them with 12 people like we used to be able to play them with.
Right.
So
And
just thinking about how we want to do that.
Yeah, and Steve hit on something else too that's really important. Right now, stores are doing business in a different way. Some stores are doing delivery, a lot of stores are doing curbside pickup. There's some stores that have a real limited capacity to come in and shop. All of that is building this new customer base. There's new people that are coming in, and they're looking for games that they can play with the family. So there has to be an adjustment on our end in what we focus on, what we stock in. The equations from 6 months ago as to what type of game is going to sell what percentage, those are out the door right now. We've got new customers coming in looking for things, and that means there's a lot of games that may not be new, but they're new to them, and we have the expertise to be able to introduce them to.
So, Charlie, you have a little bit different perspective of this again because your customers get to do the thing that they love with your comic books on their own. So, are you seeing people who are interacting with your comics and other things that you make a little bit different way, or is it business as usual?
I mean, it's weird. I mean, like the entirety of publishing is very strange because I think everyone in this conference, like we're all very lucky to have like either very small offices where, I don't think most of us have to like furlough people. I mean, like, I think Mike is probably the most vulnerable, due to warehousing and logistics concerns, but like, for us, it's like publishing and content creation hasn't slowed down at all. Like, if anything, we've never been busier. It's marketing, promotion, and sales that's been severely disrupted. And so, like, a lot of the big changes that we've seen is that, like, you schedule out comic books to be rolled out, on the publishing level to sort of like you're thinking in terms of strategy. When books are done, you're like slotting things in for like targeted releases. And because now between like, production, manufacturing, and distribution, everything's just kind of like, relatively chaotic right now and will be for the foreseeable future. It's been interesting to see that like our sales like are down, but not nearly as bad as we thought it was going to be. And a lot of that's because like people are buying books online. We're doing some brisk business with like direct to consumer with like books that have like exclusives. So it's like like reading habits are evolving, and it's been real interesting to see. Like when everyone went into lockdown, we got a very strong indication that there were a lot of families who were looking for like essentially activity kits for like their kids and families while people are figuring out homeschooling. So the books for us that are sort of YA, middle grade, and younger, really spiked. We've been real fortunate where a lot of the titles that we've been focusing on for like the last couple of years with regards to not only publishing but like gaming, like the entire Katie O'Neill franchise with like Tea Dragon Society and Aquaportin Cove, like, for us, even before all the coronavirus stuff sort of landed on everyone, we sort of assumed that like, titles like that were going to be the future, and the way we were approaching them with regards of like not just putting out a book, but doing things like plush toys and, things for fans and of course gaming with you guys, it's been interesting to see that like sped up the process and the evolution of everything in the industry, because classically Oni has always sat on this shelf where we were kind of neither fish nor fowl. Like we weren't trying to do floppy comics the way that like Image, Dark Horse, Boom were trying to do it, but we also weren't going whole hog into sort of New York style book publishing market like the First Seconds, the Random Houses of the world, and we were sort of forging this middle path. And part of that was us trying to not only diversify the line of books that we were publishing, but also the way we approached the product that we were making. And so like this whole pandemic has been an interesting sort of, I don't know, it's weaponized the focus that we need to have about like how we approach the dialogue between like not only readership but distribution. And it's just like when it comes down to content, it's the core principles of trying to make stuff that's weird and fun and satisfying for readers is still the same. And it just kind of feels like the rest of the industry is now being forced to kind of play catch up in the sense of like it's no longer reduced down into these like micro formats of like here's floppies or these are graphic novels and then there's manga over there. It's like now like we're really seeing this like acceleration of like, oh, it's you kind of have to do a little bit of everything. And so like how this sort of affects us at street level has been kind of like, I don't know, it's we're all doing too much to try to be all things to everyone with regards to customers, but it's an ongoing process to try to figure out what's effective and what's not.
There's certainly a lot of changes. I
Put
think
heat
that
on everybody.
that all of us are trying to do all at once. So that does push us into new directions. And I think as just humans in general, that can be a really good thing to have these challenges. So Scott, what are some of the favorite innovations you've seen since this happened that you think are going to be really good and stick?
Well, I mean, so I think like Charlie and Mike and really everybody's kind of touched on this. Because the landscape is changing, it's forcing publishers to explore new ways to market and reach their customers. And I think that's something that's been needed. So like my opinion of the way the industry should work is that publishers are responsible for creating a market for their stuff, right? We are the ones that need to build a fan base and create demand for our things. Maybe 20 years ago on the game side, in the heyday of collectible card games, that was, you put out a collectible card game and you put it into the market and that category was hot and it sold, right, to a certain extent. And I think that created a perception within the game space, especially, was that if I make a game, I just have to get it into distribution. Distribution solves all my problems. Put it into distribution and it'll sell. And it hasn't been that way for 15 years, and it's not going to be that way in the future either. And I'm a big proponent. I'm constantly telling new publishers, because I hear this all the time. A new publisher will ask me, like, how do I get into distribution? I said, well, distribution isn't your problem. You need to create a market for your product. Then distribution will take care of itself. If there's a market, distribution's easy. Somebody will want to carry your stuff. So the innovations that I'm seeing now is that I think it's forcing our industry as a whole to shift and look at that and say, I think the glut was starting this process, but this has really accelerated that. You have to market your stuff. You have to be able to build a relationship with your customer, and you have to build a market. Kind of the way I see the geography of our world is that you know, game stores, comic book stores, that kind of like specialist clubhouse store is the mountaintop experience. Like that is the best experience for somebody that's into our stuff. That's the mountaintop. But there's lots of valleys in between the mountains, and there's lots of other people that want our stuff that don't know how to get it, that don't even know it exists. And it's our job to fill in the gaps between those mountains and bring them into the industry. So there's no one size fits all solution, but I do think that's one of the innovations, not even really an innovation. I think it's we're accelerating that progress, and the more publishers that are good at this is going to just grow the industry for everybody. So I do think that there's a very bright future for our industry. So a lot of good comes out of challenge, and I think right now we're reacting to that challenge.
People are
Absolutely.
starting to figure out that the verticals. Sorry, no, we're still having fun with delay all day, every day. But people are starting to figure out that there are verticals in brands now. That a brand needs to have. It can't just be a release anymore. There needs to be a brand.
Mhm.
So the days of just like, oh, I'm putting a release out and it's going to come out. It's going to have its time in distribution, and then it's going to go away. Especially in the role playing space, the more that you can build a brand that you can rally people around and build a community base around and build a player base around, the more successful it's going to be. And there are companies that have been doing that already, and like even like Oni, with what you guys are doing, just trying to make sure that your releases have wings in other places other than just novels. That's important, which also just means that we have to be choosy about like what we go forward with, because if it's going to be a brand, then there's a lot more invested into making sure that that brand succeeds versus being like, oh, okay, well, I'll grab this one, grab this one, through them, get them all done. It's different. It's not it is not a new thing, like you said, Scott. This is not new knowledge. This is just accelerating the concept of what works versus kind of getting stuck in the old ways of the past.
It's almost like the
Yeah.
crisis is forcing the discipline in our business practices and creative that everyone sort of knew was there. Like, for us, like, the slow ongoing evolution of Oni is that, like, before I switched over into like this business creative development position at the company, I was senior editor for 6 years, right? And I worked on all sorts of titles like floppy series, graphic novels, the whole nine. And the dream at a company like Oni is that eventually you want to get to a point where you're doing less titles and less releases, but the efforts behind each of those individual releases has more depth and more meaning behind them. So it's like, every time I look at the competition, I look at the way comics publishing sort of goes, is that we all are publishing too many titles, and it's just the challenge of not getting distracted and being able to sort of focus and drill down on stuff, so that eventually your business model becomes about not shallow and broad where you're just shotgunning releases out in the marketplace. It's trying to do stuff that's like sort of narrow and deep, so that way, like, again, it's like Katie O'Neill is kind of a great case study for us, like Brian O'Malley is with Scott Pilgrim, where those are like massive franchises for us that have a couple of releases, but like we're just building within those sandboxes, so that like Tea Dragon Society is going to have like 2 to 4 books in the end as the whole series, but the releases within that are going to include like all this other merchandising, including games. And games is not like just this vestigial offshoot, it's like its own meaningful release, and it's sort of like all these things cross-pollinate each other, even though they're sort of part of the same franchise, but they're not like support. It's just you're doing all of them, with a lot of momentum and a lot of force.
The game industry had a kid.
So, Charlie, I don't want to
Change
put
its
you on the
focus.
spot too much or anything, or leave anybody out. So if anybody wants to jump in and answer this, I'd love to hear from you too. But I'm wondering specifically, because I've seen Oni Press do a lot of really cool things. What do you think the entertainment industry in general, do you think it serves a purpose for society in general, in uncertain and challenging times? Like, is there something that you feel you really need to be doing to help people out when coronavirus hits, when there's a lot of political unrest, when people are just kind of scared and worried? And how do you go about doing that?
I mean, it's fascinating to have this conversation today, because it's like, you never know what you're chasing, and it's like, any good comics publisher, anyone in entertainment in general, is never trying to, if you're smart, you're not just chasing the trend that already came and went. You're trying to hit what the zeitgeist is, right? So, by and large, most of the conversations I have, especially on the film TV side, kind of come down to like, what are stories that people are going to resonate with? What are the stories that are kind of meaningful? But also, because we're living through a pandemic, it's kind of like you don't want stuff that is super nihilistic, so thinking about entertainment, which again, it's disposable things that are meant for, it's escapist entertainment for people to feel good, but you also want to give them stuff that feels like it's speaking to the experiences they're living through. It's like, you're chasing after stories that are like, diversity is obviously top of mind right now, like as it always is at Oni, but it's particularly potent right this second. Doing stories about sort of, connections within your community and people being able to work together because we're all in shelter right now. I think the role of entertainment kind of comes down to like, these are narrative ways for us to speak to, the experiences we all share collectively.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't just have to be escapism.
Yeah,
Totally.
exactly.
Right.
I think the stories we read, the stories we enjoy together, they can help us interpret what's going on at the time. If you look at the great literature throughout history, and I include, comics in literature, if you look at that, it's a product of the time, and it speaks to the issues of the time, often in a way that people can understand way better than turning on the news and getting a information that's leaning one way or the other. And role playing's the exact same. You're able to deal with issues and work through and tell a story in which you start to realize the humanity of other people. You start to understand what's going on in the broader world. And that's one of the things I love about this business all the way around. It's the stories that we enjoy together, the stories that we experience together, that we love, and the stories we create together and tell together.
Yeah. I like to tell my kids that I learned how to be a good person from Spider-Man and Superman directly. I had the best mentors.
You're pretty good.
Absolutely.
So don't question what I'm telling you. It actually comes from those guys. I'm just passing it on.
I don't know what this is about me, but I feel like I've learned
Don't shoot the
everything about
messenger,
business.
kids.
Like, I don't know what it says about me, but I think I've learned everything I know about business and business development and in the entertainment industry from watching The Wire. Like, I definitely subscribe to the core philosophies of Omar Little and Proposition Joe and Stringer Bell. So, it's funny how entertainment can serve us as like, haha funny. But at the same time, any great piece of literature or entertainment sort of leaves you coming away with like a view of how to look at the world, and it drives how you inhabit it.
So, Scott, along those lines, how do you use game publishing, which doesn't always have stories in it? Like, we might have a game about plants that doesn't really touch on any of that. How do you still use those things to promote diversity and still get more people into this community that we've built that's actually pretty positive and supportive during difficult times?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that there's a couple different ways. Like, there's a few brands that come to mind that we're working with. Like Power Rangers, for example, is a good example of an incredibly diverse brand at its core, right? When you look at that show that started in 1993 and the cast and how diverse it is and the messages of cooperation and teamwork, and it was a very empowering show to kids. And then we do a game on it, but that's really not a kid's game. It's for adults. We're bringing those people into our community. So, like, we've experienced it firsthand at Renegade. We've got this giant influx, and it's not a small community. There's 26 years of that show, and the game's become like one of our best sellers, and that community is very, very active. And now they're being exposed to other games. But then on the other hand, you have something like Katie O'Neill's library and P-Dragons and Aquacorn Cove. I remember when we first, partnered up with Oni, I think I was sitting there with Charlie and James and Steve, and I said, I just want to do all our stuff. Like, this was when we were looking at after. And I said, I just want to do everything that he puts out sight unseen, because the importance of her content, and just even from a purely business point of view, why would I not want to reach new people that she speaks to. But reverse of that, by bringing her content into our world, we're also exposing more people to diverse content and diverse creators and subject matter and stories. So it's this massive cross pollination that's really good for everybody. And I I gotta give like Charlie credit for this. If you don't want to do it because it's the right thing to do it because it's a good business decision. Like at bare
Yeah.
minimum, do it because it's a good business decision, even if it doesn't speak to you personally as a good moral and ethical decision. The nice thing is it's good on both levels, and right, it's good. It checks all the boxes. It's good for us. It's good for our industry. But I do think that those are two good examples that come to mind. But it's really important to our industry and just as a society as a whole to cross pollinate, expose people to new things, because it really just helps us understand each other better.
Yeah, definitely. So, Steve, as a store owner, you really do form those communities in a very substantial way. You have those people coming to you and hanging out, spending time with you. And I think a lot of them consider you their family as well, beyond even just your staff. Like they spend a lot of time with you. So, what do you do in your own communities within your store to try and promote that sense of it's fine for anybody to come to the table? We're a safe space.
Yeah, I think one of the big mistakes I see stores make on that front is that they try to be a little too in your face about it, right? And in reality, it's like this is the experience, right? I mean, the experience is welcoming. We do welcome everyone. Everyone is I mean, if you come to a game night at our store, there's no one who's not going to be welcomed and have a great time, right? I mean, my staff is very welcoming. I think there are things you can specifically do when you have game nights at the store. One of the things I really push to other store owners is to not forget that you need someone to host the event. Like, if you're going to have a bunch of gaming, you need a host because the worst thing ever is to show up for a game night and look around the room and see a whole bunch of people sitting at tables playing games, and then no one pays any attention to the people who come in, right? Because it's one thing to have six, game masters or people teaching board games or whatever that are fully engaged at those tables, but you need to remember that there needs to be someone else around to be welcoming and engage people when they walk in. It's like, oh, we just started a bunch of games. It's like we'll get another table going here in just a minute. Talk to the people, figure out what they're into. I mean, be welcoming and I mean, because just walking into a space and seeing people playing isn't going to get it done, right? You need to engage with those people on a personal level, right? And let them know that you care that they showed up. Let them know that you care about them as a human being and you want to make sure they have a good time and get together with some other like-minded folks to play a game and have fun this evening, right? So it's all about hosting and making sure your events are fun and welcoming. And I mean, it's just like, what would you want out of an evening experience, right? And the same thing with our demo tables in the store, right? The best sales tool we have is the fact that we have tables on the sales floor with product for people to engage with and in a tactile way, and the staff is more than willing to come out and talk about a game or make recommendations, and it's just being open and welcoming to everyone, and letting everyone know that we do have very specific rules. There are types of behavior that are not acceptable in the store, and we have we have posters with those rules posted on the walls of our play space and things like that as well. But that's kind of I see that as kind of the background stuff. The important thing is to be welcome and open and be really friendly and engage with people. And I think that comes down to the staff again, right? You have to have a great staff. And you also have to remember that, people don't inherently know how to do all of these things. So training for your staff is really important. It's like just because you're a fan of games doesn't mean you know how to be a welcoming, person at the door, right? When someone walks in, right? You can be passionate about something, but not know how to share that passion, right? So you have to work with people.
Hey, Sarah,
Absolutely.
can I jump in?
It's like a house party.
Yes, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, it is.
I was just going to say, it's inclusivity is not passive. It has to be active. You have to choose
Mm-hmm.
to do it, and it's something that we need to be actively thinking about. The whole gamma concept of a game at every table and a table for every gamer. That's what I've loved about this business from the beginning. Is I was a geek. in middle school and high school, right? It gave me a place to be myself with friends and to come out of my shell and become, become a more active overall human being. And there's so many people that for whatever reason feel that way. They feel kind of pushed to the side, and our industry is one that says to them, "You're welcome here." And I love stores like Steve's that actively are involved in that, making it a not just a don't be a jerk, but
Yeah.
be an open place, be attractive to them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you have to be
definitely.
more than. I mean, the most satisfying thing to me has been after 22 years that we have, you see the kids that were us, right, when we were younger, maybe a little bit awkward, maybe not the most socially adept, right, but we see those kids coming back now as adults with families of their own and bringing their kids and their spouses into the store, and and seeing that cycle is really cool to us, right? I mean, just knowing that it's like, oh, look, it really is a big deal, and it's funny, I'll have parents say, it's like, oh, my kids love coming here, and it's like, it's so cool that they get to engage with other kids, but also they get to engage with a diverse crowd of adults. It's like,
Yeah.
my kid played Magic last night with an engineer and a lawyer, right? It's like, I mean, that's kind of a cool
And
thing,
beat
right?
them both.
Yeah, it's not the kind of thing, or in my kids' D&D group at your store, it's like two 15-year-olds and then like a mom, a lawyer, and an engineer, right? Like that's a dynamic that you don't get anywhere else, right? You don't
Yeah.
get to engage with all of these different people in different aspects of life.
Yeah. Well, and
Yeah,
it's nice too. Back when I had my store, I used to say this to my store staff, and then now I often say it to our internal staff and our booth staff when we're doing events. Is that always remember that somebody that walks through your door of your store or walks into our booth or is there at the convention in the first place, this is their fun time. Like this is their happy place. They chose to spend their time and money engaging with us and our stuff. um, if you can't connect with them and make them happy, like we're doing something wrong. Like they want to be here. This isn't the DMV. This isn't like, oh, Saturday morning I got to go down and renew my license. Like that poor DMV clerk, they don't have that. Like we're in the business of fun and entertainment. Like our customers are low hanging fruit. Like they're excited. But we have to meet them halfway or more so, right? And we need to exceed their expectations and really engage with them. And like what you said about new people, I always think about the first day of school. That's a first day of school experience, being new to a community and trying to join a community. And it's no matter how old you are, that's a difficult thing. So being able to have that greeter welcome them, bring them in, and make them feel at home is huge. I mean, and as an industry, we need to be doing that all the time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
if
it
you
definitely.
has
had
to
a
be the
party,
best
if
house
you had a
party.
yeah, if you
Yeah,
had a house
yeah,
party, like you would never in your wildest dreams think that you were going to ignore everyone who walked in
right,
and just
Yeah.
assume they would have a good time, right?
right.
Well, I'm fascinated by like tabletop and gaming retail and comics retail has a very similar parallel structure to like a high-end fancy restaurants. It's like, if you run a good gaming store, you can tell the difference because it's kind of like it's like a good restaurant. It's like the amount of resources they put towards like the front of house, like the wait staff and sort of like the hostesses kind of go in, and it being sort of like I don't know, it's like going to like a fancy restaurant with like communal dining tables. It's that weird thing where like you can go to a game shop on like a Friday night or whatever, and it's just like a bunch of people who should not be hanging around, like spending money and playing games and kind of hanging out, and it's like a weird similarity to sort of watch.
Instead of a sixty
So I have
dollar bottle of
one.
wine, though, you're going to be selling a game.
Yeah, no, and,
Right.
and well, I mean, maybe not a $60 bottle of wine, but like you might be selling $60 worth of snacks.
I've done that, I think. So I have one more very important question for all of you before we go to our Q&A section. So starting with Ivan, what games have you been playing at home the last couple months?
Dude, I have been diving so deep into the like games that are developed to be played at home. I actually learned two yesterday from Banana Chan that I've been reading about, and the one is called a long time listener, first time caller. where you're basically playing a radio host, but there's an apocalypse going on. And it's just kind of an escalating situation where the people are calling into the radio station and the host is there in like a War of the Worlds type, like, all right, caller, what are you seeing? Kind of a situation. And it's fascinating. We also, I've just been in development a whole lot, like working on our games, because there's just try to still play other stuff just to keep that fresh perspective, but we're just so deep into development on everything right now. It's been mostly keeping that going. I will say though, there's something to be said for the people who are putting really good efforts into building strong APIs for things like Tabletop Simulator and Tabletoptopia. I had a regular Gloomhaven game, Brunchhaven, that we had been playing for like a year and a half, and we stopped it. And then I found out that they had this really awesome, like, basically double click a location and it builds the map for you kind of API on Tabletop Simulator, and it's amazing. And I don't think, even if the quarantine was over, I don't think we'd ever go back, because it's just so convenient to be able to click and have the whole map set up for that game. And it's awesome. Someone spent like 2 months of their lunch break building that, and I have to celebrate them forever. It's amazing.
Pretty awesome. Those sound like fun. We'll have to check those out. Charlie, how about you?
Oh my God, my gaming habits are all over the place right now because like I'm so used to playing socially, so like my entire gaming diet right now is reduced down to just me and my wife when she could spare the time because she was finishing school, and my 6-year-old. So like it's been mostly 2-player games. So like the stuff my wife and I have been playing have been like Arboretum is a game we play a lot all the time forever. I think that's a game that's never leaving the rotation. Which shout out to you guys. It is the most ruthless game I've ever played and the most satisfying. I love that thing forever. But we've been playing a lot of Wingspan, which I think is sort of one of the strongest games anyone's put out in the last couple of years.
Also really good on Tabletop Simulator.
Yeah, another game that like not a lot of people know about, but I think is incredible. The folks who made Guitar Hero and Rock Band put out a game called Drop Mix a couple of years ago. It's basically like a deck building music making game with like a giant board that plugs into a tablet. But anyway, it lets you it's a deck builder as a DJ game. That is a blast. And that's kind of come back with a lot of fury. It's like the kind of game where like my wife and I can kind of sit down and play it and make up jams. So it's like you can take the vocals from Every Rose Has Its Thorn by Poison and mash it up to Young MC with like the drums from TLC. I mean, like it's like if you haven't played it, I highly recommend. That game is incredible. But yeah, and then past that, it's like I've been playing like I'm in like 2 campaigns on Roll20 for D&D, and that went from being like role playing was always a hard thing to kind of get me to invest the time in, but like now that we're all at home, it's my respect and appreciation for how good Roll20 is as a platform has just grown by leaps and bounds the more I sort of have lived with it.
I certainly think that's one of the cool innovations that we've seen since everything shut down is a lot of these companies that were just sort of hanging out and doing their thing like Roll20 and Tabletopia are suddenly a very big focus for a lot of publishers and a lot of players as well. So I can't wait to see what those companies are able to do in the next few years now that they have a little bit more money and a bigger player base. It's going to be cool. So that's awesome. Well, it sounds like you've been having fun at home. How about you, Mike? What have you been playing?
Last night we played Double Feature, one of your games from a little while back. We've enjoyed finding games that we can play across Zoom, so we can still get together with people that may still be, socially distancing a little. So that Blank Slate, a couple from the OP, a couple of others that have really hit our rotation pretty regularly. And then I've also I'm a role player, but I'm a miniatures heavy role player, so been taking advantage of the time to get some things painted. And my son, he's 14, and he's got a gaming group we were running a D&D game with, and been prepping that they're in trouble whenever it comes back.
Oh. If if you have the time, you'll definitely have to check out Terry's advanced how to paint workshop. I believe that's tomorrow. She's a very, very good instructor. So
amazing. Yes.
all right. How about you, Scott? What have you been playing at home?
So just the other day, I played a game that's it's in development on another simulator, online simulator, but I can't tell you what the game is because if not, Sarah will get mad at me. And I already made Sarah mad yesterday by talking about something I wasn't supposed to talk about. So I've got one strike against me. But yeah, like other stuff, non-work stuff. I just set up a permanent paint station for painting miniatures for my son and I because I like to paint, but taking stuff out and putting it away is always a pain. So we set up a part of the house for that. I'm putting together a Star Wars RPG campaign for my 3 sons. So that's in the works. I haven't run a Star Wars game in years.
D20 or Edge of the Galaxy?
It's D20. We're using the Saga Edition stuff. Yeah, which I know that system, and I have every book, so the learning curve is there. Yeah, so that's been fun. What else? I don't know. You know what? I've also been playing a lot of Hearthstone. It's rough. they stuck
right.
back in.
Animal Crossing. I heard you play a lot of Animal Crossing lately.
Yeah, I was playing a lot of Animal Crossing, but I haven't played in 2 weeks. I feel like I've beat the game now. I got up to 10 million bells, and I cornered the turnip market, so I think I'm done. So
About right.
That's basically sold like a bunch of turnips for like 2 million bells, and I was kind of done. I basically retired on my island.
Yeah, it got to the point where I was buying 2
Me and my
million
kid
bells.
Cuphead. That's how much time there is.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh man.
It became worse.
Yeah.
So that's
awesome. How about you, Steve? What have you been playing at home?
So a fair number of prototypes. I mean, some on Tabletop Simulator. Hence my role. But I also played a lot of The Crew from Cosmos, the little co-op trick-taking game. I played all the way through The Crew with my wife and then my daughter, who's an adult, but she lives close by, so she's been in our social distancing bubble. So we played all the way through The Crew. We played an entire grand tour of Flamme Rouge with the app. So
wow.
That was exciting. But yeah, other than that, I mean, I played a whole lot of Gudetama in the last couple months as we were getting that ready for sale for you guys.
It's so good. The game is so good.
So I played a whole lot of that. And I've played a whole lot of the not quite announced, but I think some people know it's coming, the new T-Dragon game called Autumn Harvest. So we sent some print files to We sent some print files to this wonderful partner we have just yesterday.
Okay, I do not have to give a black mark to Scott because he bit his tongue, but Steve, it's on you this time.
I need to take one for Scott every once in a while. So there's a little. I mean, people who tune in deserve some kind of little juicy tidbit of stuff that Sarah hasn't divulged.
Well, there it is. T-Dragon 2, Autumn Harvest, coming later sometime when we'll tell you. It'll be exciting. I'm looking forward to that one.
Wait, didn't we retitle that game Two Dragons, Too Furious or something?
No.
Furious?
No. There was talk
This is why
internally.
Steve is in charge of gaming.
Yeah, I had to. Strangely, that title Katie didn't love that title.
Oh no. Well, I'm being told
yeah.
that there's a little bit cutscene before we do go into Q&A. Is that true, Chris? We have Chris on the side here. One minute.
Show cinematics?
I don't know. I have no idea what's going to happen, but it's happening now.
It's glorious.
3, 2, 1. Okay.
Hey.
Awesome. So
we're back.
I don't know what's happening. It's hard to tell, but I'm being asked a question. Is that something I should be asking the people here? Okay. I'm not sure what this Matt cutscene thing was, but I'm going to go ahead and ask the question. So this one's for Scott. How many different images And what are the images being used for the puzzle Kickstarter? And luckily, this has already been spoiled, so you don't get to spoil it.
So thank you for not digging me in deeper with Sarah, the enemy of fun. But so the first batch, it's a new Raiders of the North Sea piece of art that hasn't been on anything yet, but it's going to be on the Raiders storage box. So it's a new piece of art by the Miko. Arboretum, Kids on Bikes, and I'm forgetting one, Sarah. What am I forgetting?
Overlight.
Wait, you said
Overlight. 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 Yeah. So those four are the first wave of puzzles, but we have some other stuff in the works that might not even be based on our games. We'll see. More puzzles to come.
Yeah, I'm really excited for the puzzles. I do think that'll be a fun and slightly different thing. All right, next question. So during this COVID-19 season, I didn't realize it was being called a season now. What have you seen in the hobby that most excites you? And what has happened that you think will have a positive long-term impact on the hobby? If anybody is excited about that, who wants to answer that one?
I'll jump in if you don't mind.
Go for it, Mike.
One of the things I've really loved seeing is all of the stores and the creative ways that they've been dealing with doing curbside again, doing pickup, etc. We are at a time, the first time in 22 years, by my calculation, that most of those local stores were able to give way, way better service, and I mean way better service than Amazon, who's taking a week and a half to get stuff to people. So, we're in a time when we're pointing people back to that friendly local game store that's already going to have the product on the shelf a lot of the time in the first place that you could go in and get it. But I've really liked seeing some engagement back with the local store without that I could just order it and have it in no time. Well, at this point, you've got curbside, you got delivery, you've got the local store around the corner, and seeing that in several industries, but especially in ours.
Yeah.
And sort of off of that, go for it. Go for it.
I was just would like to say that I would like to cast my vote that COVID is canceled after its first season.
Yes.
Yep. I think we can all agree with that.
I would prefer that it's not picked up. So.
Yes.
Yeah, I can imagine the network that picks that up really might get some hate mail.
It's going to be Amazon Prime. It's probably going to be.
Hopefully it'll be Quibi, because those are only like in short 5-minute bursts, so that's the hope.
So a slightly more serious question. What is your thought process for bringing consumers/friends into the world of tabletop gaming? So I'm going to assume this is a pretty good question for you, Steve, actually, when you see people who have never played games before and they're part of a group of friends. What do you think about a good way to get those people into gaming? Maybe games you would suggest, or that kind of thing.
I mean, it depends on the people and the setting, of course, right? I mean, if they're going to be in a group setting, you can recommend some great party games. I mean, things like Just One and stuff like that, right? That are just super easy to access and play right away. I mean, and I think, like I said earlier, that flight to quality and the known, right? Things like Catan and Ticket to Ride, these old standbys, right? But, simple little games like little card games, something like Sushi Go, little dice games like Quicks and stuff like that are just super easy, fast teaches. I think the key is to know your audience, right? And I always try to think of my extended family that's not gamers, right? And it's like, what would my aunts and uncles want to play? Maybe some, of my cousins and things like that they would be into, as opposed to what I want to play, right? It's not about me when I'm trying to get a new gamer into a game, right? I want to get them something that they're going to grasp relatively quickly. I think the key is often just quick rules explanations. Like if you can get people playing, people almost always love a game, right? The problem is when you take too long and they're like, this is what I thought. Like, right? That's when you lose people, when you don't get them engaged in playing the game, right? So if you've got new people, the key is grab something you can teach really fast and get them engaged in and get them rolling, right? It's a little different in a retail setting where you're not actually going to teach and play the game with them, maybe if they're just a customer in the store. But it's important to remember that people want to jump right in and play a game. If they're new, you don't want to bog them down with the 20-minute rules, right? You just want to
60
jump in and
seconds.
start playing. Yeah,
I think
people
that's
want
A
to
good
play and have
standard
fun.
for me is if anyone's played Game Right's Trash Pandas, that's an awesome one
Yeah.
to just kind of get
Yep.
people into it right off the bat. So
I mean, to be perfectly honest, I mean, Game Right has a plethora of home runs for new gamers. I mean, they're just great at it.
yep.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think
definitely.
like accessibility is endlessly valuable for anyone who's in games publishing and being very hyper aware of that stuff. Like it's been such a focusing part of like how Steve has looked at a lot of the Oni library and the stuff that we're working on. And I think for us on the publishing side, it's kind of like, again, if our entire line of comics and graphic novels is engineered to appeal to people where it might be their first graphic novel, or it's stuff where they don't want to be committed into a long running soap opera that they're thrown in the middle of, it's just you want to be really mindful of like, here's a game you can throw down in front of like a little kid, as part of like family time, or it's stuff where like you remember who hasn't experienced a board game in the last 20-30 years, and kind of divorcing them from like, oh, everything is like the convoluted version of Monopoly that everyone hates, and like like it's the like we have to take games like Spot It or Timeline as equally seriously as we do like things like sort of like Gloomhaven. And I think like, again, Renegade has a great diverse line where you're hitting that full spectrum, and it's like you want everyone in gaming to be mindful of that stuff.
Yeah, I think the other thing is too is that I think people who aren't into games already, they want to be engaged with a theme that they like. So like the new Space Battle Lunchtime game, if it's like Iron Chef in space. Like I've already hooked my audience, right? If they're interested in that kind of a cooking show competition, they're going to be excited to play that game, right? And then I can teach it in 60 seconds, and it's a hit, right?
Yeah,
Speaking of
definitely. I think it's
reality show,
important.
I was just going to say, speaking of reality show role-playing games, I saw a prototype a couple days ago. It was a game tentatively titled Roll for Drama, where it's a competitive role-playing game in which you make your own reality show, and I liked it.
That sounds great.
Nice. So, on a slightly different note, if we expect to see a resurgence in the fall or winter of COVID-19, possibly going back a little bit more into shutdown, do you think that stores and companies are going to be able to weather that with all of these new innovations, all these changes that we've made? Do you think that's going to even be possible to go through all of that again?
I mean, I'll take it from my perspective. I think yes, of course it's possible. I think that anybody running a business right now should be considering that possibility. Right, like what we do internally is we look at multibilities and say how would these things affect us, and how would we deal with it. I do think that publishers have it easier than the other tiers in the industry. I think retail stores it's more challenging, and I think for distribution it's more challenging as well. Distribution is like the middleman squeezed in the middle, making the smallest margin out of us all, and then you have retail, brick and mortar retail, where again, like what they are great at, they get their legs cut out from under them because they can't have those social experiences and shoppers coming into the store, and it's just more challenging. Curbside pickup is great, but it's not as engaging, right, as the person coming into your store and a member of the clubhouse. So I think our industry tends to prosper in these challenging times, but it doesn't mean it's not hard to get through them. And I think that's okay. We just have to address it head on and come up with the best solution. So, we'll be here. We've just gotta be smart about it.
Yeah. I agree with Scott. I agree with Scott. It's probably easiest for Scott's tier. It'd be super easy for the publishers. No.
No problem at all. So I will apologize. I just now realized that there are actually names on these questions that I did not see on my screen before. So I'll make sure to call out. So thank you for asking those great questions for the people that I didn't mention. For this next question, this is from Jason Kilkey, and he's asking, how do you envision the pandemic changing the types of games that are designed and published in the future? I think this is probably a great question for you, Ivan, because he's also asking where the impacts on types of components, production methods, gameplay features, and I think Hunters Entertainment is doing a great job with that already.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at technology and how we can continue to bring immersion into the games while with using technology without getting into that fuzzy gray area of it becoming too much like a video game. You know what I mean? Where you still have parameters that allow you to have an open imagination about what's going on, but utilizing the things that are available. So, I've been playing around with the game design that's centered strictly around Google Docs, just to kind of see how it plays in that space to do something that's fun there. There's if anyone's tried out a game called View Scream, it's a thriller horror RPG that specifically plays in a Zoom conference like scenario where it's basically everyone's in different parts of the ship and you're checking in with the bridge and they're relaying commands between you and your other stations across the space station. And it's just things like that, like trying to find the themes that lay really close into how you can utilize technology and continue to do development, because things like Alice is Missing right now, which is trying to take something that everyone avoids at their game table, which is like, okay, well, it's not my turn, I'm just going to go like on the internet, right? Because my initiative round is over. And it's, can you turn a negative experience of checking your phone every few minutes and also capitalize on that really primal kind of teenage angst, anxiety of like, oh my, like waiting for those little dots because the text message you sent, are they going to interpret it the way that you thought it in your brain? It's like that new type of way of communicate that's very visceral. Because that's the thing, just because it's on technology does not need to make it less human. It's harder because we're far away. I'm talking through a screen to you who are looking at me through a screen, so we're double screened away. But there are ways to be able to like make that connection closer.
So, Scott, with the timing of the way production works with games, are you thinking of changing any of the components or any of the production stuff with games, or are you expecting that the things you're developing right now are going to be at a time when people don't have to social distance anymore?
I mean, I think it's a little of both. We definitely, back in March, one of the first things we did is we took a hard look at our schedule and said, what is there anything on our schedule that might not be appropriate for this year? And we did push a couple things into next year because for multiple reasons, like whether or not we're in a lockdown situation, too many things coming out at one time. We suspended any of our releases for a few months because we don't want to release things when our retail partners aren't open. So there's that. Components are a fair thing. Like I saw a retailer just post on social media this morning and said, "Publishers, I don't want your party games. Bring me more two-player games." And I kind of had to chuckle because 3 years ago, when we were putting out more two-player games, that was a big discussion internally. We were like, "Oh man, a lot of retail stores probably won't support two-player games. It's too limiting. Only 2 players can play them. Who would want that?" And we've done very well with two-player games. So, Fox in the Forest has sold, I've lost count, like we're up to the 9th printing or something on that game. And so it's interesting how the market does change. And I think two-player games, 11th printing, was that what that was? 11th printing. So, yeah, I mean, we are looking at all those things, but also there is going to be a time where social distancing and lockdown is over. We hope. And I think that's realistic. So it's a balancing act. You don't want to pull too far in either direction because I do think we've seen this before with other crises, in our world. When things do kind of get back to normal or whatever the new normal is, people do want to experience the things that they've missed as well. So you've just gotta balance them out.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Chris, back there on the back end, do you have any other questions from the audience for us? Looking for some more questions just for the next few minutes. All right, so this is a good question probably for either Ivan or Scott again. from Brian W. How are you engaging with designers looking to publish in this time? So I know for Renegade, we're usually pretty far out, but we do take a lot of pitches at conventions, and suddenly we don't have conventions anymore. So do either of you want to speak to that a little bit?
I mean, I'll give my short answer. I'd actually like to hear how Ivan's dealing with it because I don't know. We are participating. Origins Online is in 2 weeks, and they are doing a publisher speed dating online, and we're participating in that. But to be honest, right now, at least for the next month or so, like we've kind of put that on pause as well because we have pushed some releases out, and we're looking to evaluate our schedules down the road. And like Sarah alluded to, we work pretty far out now. Like our schedule for next year is, it was pretty much done when this year started. So we try not to be under the gun, like, kind of desperate for releases. So hopefully when things start to loosen up again, we can just kind of get back to our normal flow. So that's that. But yeah, Ivan, how are you doing?
I mean, we're kind of growing into that space a little bit where we used to have to kind of be reactionary with the stuff that we've found and like into it. Like I'm always trying to keep an open mind. Like, I like to say there's no luck in the world. There's just opportunity and preparation. So as long as I'm just allowing myself to be open to an opportunity, I'm never turning that off as far as like opportunities go. But at the same time, I'm really focusing on trying to take care of the people who I know who have been working in this space a long time and might be having a difficult time. Like I know that there's a lot of more people who have been in the hobby a long time and now are not having the kind of regular work or the kind of income that they were focusing on beforehand as a part of a lot of the things that are happening. And I've been trying to use the opportunity to try to just provide a support network when and how and if I can. And so it's less about developers in that sense. And like, for example, when this was really happening in a hard time, and a lot of people like Emerald City Comic Con who were, big artists who are used to going and selling their prints at shows and things like that. I was willing to like accelerate some art costs for art. It's like, I don't need the art right now. Like this isn't usually the time that I would buy art, but because I know that this is a really tough time, like we're going to do this because I want to make sure that you've still got something to be able to hold on to. So minus little situations like that, I'm not looking at a lot of new people who are out there. I'm trying to take care of the people who I know need the help now and who have been in the space in a while. But I haven't, like anything else, I'm not turning the spigot off completely. That's kind of counterintuitive. I don't know.
How about you, Charlie?
It seems weird to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. On our end, it's weird. It's like we're full blast on content production right now. Like, there's no more convention season. We're fielding pitches here and there, but like, Oni has always been classically like a quasi closed shop. Like our team on the project acquisition editorial side tends to try to target and go after creators rather than sort of taking cold submissions by and large. So it's like on the publishing side, that's kind of what I'm experiencing. On the other side, on sort of the film TV side of things, it's like all production for live action is dead, but development is very active. So it's very surreal to sort of like be at home doing a lot of meetings, a lot of calls, and it's just, in Hollywood, everyone is just at full blast because everyone's still working. They're just all at home. So it's a strange dichotomy. It's a very, very strange dichotomy.
So we have a question from Christopher Daly. He's asking about print and plays. He's saying he really likes the tactical feel that games give him, but he was wondering if there was ever a chance of giving files for 3D printed pieces. But I think I can probably answer this one a little bit. Since we make 3D games, we don't do a lot of print and plays, really. But we do occasionally, just so other people are aware, we did put out a print and play during April because we wanted people to have something at home since they couldn't even go to their stores to get anything. And so we put out a free version of Wonderland. So if you're looking for a print and play, definitely go to our website and you'll be able to find that one. But yes, we all love the way that all those games feel. So we're right there with you. And we do lots of 3D printing in our games, and then we sell them in stores. So there you go. You can do that. So this is another question from James Braziel for Charlie and Steve. Have web comics taken off for Oni Press, or has it been more of a physical domain? Are people more interested now that they're at home in those digital comics, or do you guys even do that?
Um, Web comics are at the center of a lot of conversations internally right now. And again, we've done stuff historically, like we serialized titles like Kim Reaper as web comics, as well as like putting them out as standard sort of releases. We did the same thing with Megan Rose Gadget's Spectacle comic, which I highly recommend everyone check out. That title is amazing. And on top of that, like even Katie serialized some Dragon Society on her own website. So it's web comics are web comics have been around forever. I mean, it feels like a relatively new thing, but like people have been doing comics online for I don't know, the last 20 years as a format. Like it's kind of like been percolating around the entire time I've been in comics. So like in 2020, I don't think it's as simple as like, is there more interest? I think that interest never went away. I mean, Webtoons and Tapas and all these other folks, Hiveworks who are publishing online, I imagine they have a lot more readership. For us, it's like we're trying to figure out a middle path in a way that like comports with, again, serializing things online, doing it in a way that's a little different than anyone else would do it, and also like being able to do it in a way that takes care of our retail partners with physical releases and doing it in the similar approach that we do the rest of publishing. So like it's a real good question. I don't have a lot of answers because like I think like we're kind of actively researching a lot of it right now and the implications of how to deploy it, because like beyond it sounding very simple to just like, oh hey, you can just post a bunch of stuff and serialize it online, you build a website. It's like there's a robustness of how you execute those ideas and how that engages with the community and the readership that are complicated, require education for our organization, as well as how creators utilize those toolkits. And then on top of that, like you want to build stuff that has an attachment to retail items that you're selling. So it's like I don't want to be in a spot where suddenly we have like this really garish website that feels like a NASCAR sponsored thing with pop-ups left and right, to justify doing comics. And I'm also like an old person, at least relatively speaking, in comics, where like I still love print publishing because I think a book is the best format for comics. And so it's sort of like bridging that gap where it feels like, in whatever evolution this is going to end up being, it's almost like web comics are like, watching TV live as it runs on a network. And then eventually publishing is almost like, watching something on streaming, or like the equivalent of back in the day, you used to buy DVD box sets and things like that. And so like that question is very front of mind for us internally right now.
I bet. That sounds like a big challenge, and definitely one of the many things that all of us will have to be answering and thinking of as we move into this new normal. But I think that all of us have a lot of really good ideas. I've been so impressed with seeing how not only the publishers and creators in this industry have done, but everybody all the way down to the community. Everyone has really come together and been really supportive and helpful and just excited about getting back to that new normal, but also taking advantage of this time that we have at home and being able to play some games with some different people, get new community members in. And I think there's a lot of really good positive stuff coming out of what we've seen here. So I really appreciate each one of you for coming and chatting with us about all of this. I think this is really good information. I hope our fans really enjoyed this too. Thank you all for so many great questions. The one last question that somebody did pose, James Braziel, was asking about eureka moments in game design, development, and production. And instead of answering that here, I'm going to suggest that you come to our awesome panel that's all about behind the scenes in game development on Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So James, we'd love to see you at that one. But for everyone else, thank you for your great questions. Thank you for joining us, and enjoy the rest of the convention. Have a great afternoon. Thanks.
Thanks.